mistakes are held to account. In its review, the IG's office found former FBI director made serious errors in judgment in deviating from policies and releasing information about the Clinton investigation just before the 2016 election. It's important the American people understand that there are 37,000 hardworking FBI employees, and the report takes issue with a few discrete decisions by just a handful of those employees. Even then, it finds decisions in the Clinton investigation were not the result of political bias. I'm encouraged that DOJ and FBI are prepared to learn lessons from this report. One conclusion stood out to me. The IG found that FBI policies are, and I quote, most important to follow when the stakes are the highest and when the pressures to divert from them the greatest. Those include policies to avoid interference with ongoing investigations and even the appearance of a political bias. Director Wray, I've expressed time and again that I'm concerned the Department of Justice is being pressured to release information to Congress that could compromise the special counsel's ongoing investigation. I'm all for oversight after the conclusion of an investigation, but I'd like to hear that you're committed to ensuring the Bureau will not risk interference with special counsel Mueller's ongoing criminal investigations by providing midstream information to Congress that risks leaking to the very subjects of that investigation. Could you give us that assurance today?
Senator, while on the one hand, we are, of course, committed to cooperating with legitimate congressional oversight, and that's an important part of our responsibility, we are also committed and obligated to protect the integrity of ongoing criminal investigations, not just the one you mentioned, but others. We're also obligated to protect sources and methods. We're also obligated to do things like respect grand jury secrecy, which actually makes it illegal for us to share certain information. None of that is meant to suggest that we don't want to do everything we can, and in fact are doing everything we can to cooperate with the, I think, maybe 6 different committees of Congress that are investigating different ways related matters. We're providing mountains of information, briefings, interviews, reading room access, et cetera, and so we're doing everything we can to be responsive while at the same time making sure that we don't jeopardize ongoing criminal investigations, and that's something I'm committed to.
Thank you. Our president has repeatedly described the FBI's investigation into campaign activities in 2016. In fact, he did this earlier today, about 11:27 today, as a witch hunt. You and I both know the Justice Department has uncovered ongoing interference with our 2016 elections, has already charged 20 individuals and 3 companies with crimes. Trump campaign and administration officials have admitted to acting as undisclosed foreign agents for a pro-Russian political party and lying about conversations with the Russian ambassador, not to mention bank fraud, money laundering, tax crimes. I'll just ask you a conclusory question, if I might. Do you believe the investigation into Russia's interference in our 2016 election is important and should be completed without political interference? Efforts to politicize an ongoing federal investigation. Director Wray, the president's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, is now in jail. He's been charged with 25 felonies, laundering tens of millions of dollars, committing tax fraud, encouraging witnesses to lie. President Trump has called this very unfair. Should the American people have faith that the Manafort investigation is being handled fairly?
Senator, I'm not going to speak for the special counsel's office. What I would say is that I expect all of our employees to conduct themselves professionally and fairly.
Does the FBI take the political opinions of FBI agents into account when choosing how to staff an investigation? Have political beliefs ever influenced either your work at the FBI or which agents are chosen for a particular investigation?
I don't use political litmus tests as a basis for choosing who works on investigations. I do think it is extremely important that all of our agents understand not just the importance of objectivity, but the appearance of objectivity. And to me, that means that we need to be focused on making sure that we're following our rules, following our processes, following what the Inspector General refers to as long-established norms. The safe place for us is in process and making sure that we follow the process and that we do that independently and objectively. No matter who likes the result, we'll be okay. But the important thing is to make sure that our process is bulletproof.
I couldn't agree more. Mr. Horowitz, President Trump has claimed FBI officials are biased against him and in favor of former Secretary Hillary Clinton. Let me just make sure I've understood this right. In your investigation, did you find the FBI took any investigative step based on political bias against the current president?
No, the one area where we were concerned about bias was in the October time period, and the weighing of Agent Strzok between the focusing on the Russian investigation versus focusing on the Wiener laptop, and our concern about his decision given the text messages.
But did you conclude that we should have concern about either the initiation or the ongoing conduct of the special counsel's investigation based on those texts?
We didn't look at the special counsel investigation as part of this review.
Last question to you, Mr. Horowitz. This report seems to vindicate the wisdom of many long-established DOJ policies and practices, the chain of command, the need to strictly comply with recusal. The department policies are in place for a reason, and it was wrong to deviate from them, and it would be wrong to deviate now. Do you agree that ad hoc deviations from established policies and procedures should be avoided?
I do, and I think that's partly one of the most important takeaways of this report.
Well,
this is a Fox News alert. Hello, everybody. I'm Jesse Waters, and welcome to The Five. We are awaiting a White House press briefing on the controversy over separating migrant families at the border. Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen will be joining Sarah Sanders, and we're going to take you there live once they step up to the podium. But in the meantime, we head back to the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing that's underway right now on the Justice Department's IG report.
Special counsel investigation, but today's hearing reminds us that is exactly how sensitive ongoing law enforcement investigations should work. And I'm grateful for your continued efforts to protect the integrity of the FBI, the Department of Justice, and their important work, which makes us all safer. Thank you very much, Don.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. These are difficult days in the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Both the Bureau and the Department have long, decades-long, in the Department's case, centuries-long traditions of fair and impartial administration of justice. There are thousands of good and honorable men and women that work at the Bureau, that work at the Department of Justice, and yet their integrity has been called into question by misconduct and political bias at the highest levels. On May 3rd, 2017, then Director Comey testified before this committee that he had, quote, never, and never was his words, been an anonymous source in any news matters related to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation. He further testified in response to questioning from the chairman that he had not ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton administration. He answered simply and categorically no. Now, in contrast to that, former Deputy Director McCabe has stated that Director Comey was aware of his leaking to the press. Moreover, his lawyer says he has email records that demonstrated Director Comey was aware of his leaking to the press all during the time it was happening. Both of their statements cannot be true. It is not possible, logically, for Director Comey to be telling the truth and for former Deputy Director McCabe to be telling the truth. So, Director Wray, tell us, which one is telling the truth to the best of your knowledge?
Senator, unfortunately, I can't answer that question because of an ongoing matter.
Is the FBI in possession of the emails referred to by Mr. McCabe of the Deputy Director being aware of and authorizing leaks to the press?
The same answer, unfortunately.
Let me ask you, Mr. Gray, how seriously would the FBI treat the matter of the director of the FBI perjuring himself before the Senate Judiciary Committee?
Well, Senator, as the current director of the FBI testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee, I take the obligation to tell the truth extremely seriously, and I would expect our organization to do so as well.
Well, I would hope you would take as seriously the fidelity to law of prior directors. And one or the other is not telling the truth. I don't know which one is telling the truth and which one is lying, but if there are email indicia that either demonstrate Deputy Director McCabe was telling the truth or Director Comey was telling the truth, this committee and the American people need to know. And simply saying an ongoing investigation means we'll never know who lied to this committee. That's not acceptable, I believe, either to this committee or to the American people.
Well, Senator, one of the central takeaways from the Inspector General's report that's at issue today is the importance of following long-established norms in the department, which includes commenting on pending matters in front of Congress or otherwise publicly. And so I don't believe that it would be appropriate for me, no matter how tempted I might be to answer your question, to deviate from those norms in one of my first acts as director.
Director Wray, let me understand which pending matter you're referring to. The Clinton email matter is closed, is that correct?
Yes.
There's no allegation that this is under the scope of the special counsel. This has nothing to do with Russia collusion or anything else. This is a question of did the director of the FBI perjure himself to this committee? That's not within special counsel Mueller's jurisdiction, is it?
Whether the director of the FBI, I don't know what's fully within the scope of special counsel.
Well, you're declining to answer a question because you say there's an ongoing investigation.
And I can't.
I'm trying to understand what investigation arguably covers the emails demonstrating whether or not the director of the FBI committed perjury.
And I can't answer that question without describing an ongoing investigation.
So it's your position you're not going to describe any investigation, but you'll decline to answer any questions because there might be some investigation that might implicate it?
No, what I'm testifying to is that the questions you're asking, I know for a fact, implicate matters that I can't describe without implicating an ongoing investigation.
All right, let's shift to Mr. Horowitz. Let's go a little bit deeper into the issue you brought up with Senator Coons about the potential of bias in the investigation. Your conclusion was that the agents involved in the conduct, quote, brought discredit to themselves, sowed doubt about the FBI's handling of the investigation, and impacted the reputation of the FBI. There were approximately 15 full-time agents and analysts staffed on this investigation. Is that correct?
I don't, as I sit here, I'm not sure the exact number. It could well have been that number. It was a lot and probably around that number.
And Deputy Assistant Director Peter Strzok was assigned to the investigation in August of 2015 and was placed in charge of supervising the day-to-day operations.
My understanding is he was, in essence, the leading the investigation.
So the agent leading the investigation, is it true that during the period of the investigation in late 2015 and in 2016, when Mr. Strzok was in charge, he used an FBI device to call President Trump a, quote, effing idiot, although I don't believe he abbreviated it, a loathsome human, and a disaster?
Correct.
Did he also say multiple times that Donald Trump, quote, cannot be president?
Correct.
And on August 6, 2016, when FBI counsel Lisa Page said to Strzok that, quote, maybe you're meant to stay where you are because you're meant to protect the country from that menace, meaning President Trump, did Mr. Strzok reply that I can protect our country at many levels?
He did.
And 2 days later, when counsel Lisa Page asked Mr. Strzok whether Donald Trump would ever become president, did Strzok reply, quote, no, he's not, will stop it?
Correct.
And is it true that there are many similar statements by Mr. Strzok in the report?
That's correct. And indeed, you could go on to August 15, 7 days later, which was of concern to us as well, referencing an insurance policy.
Now, according to the report, beyond Mr. Strzok and Lisa Page, there were at least 3 other FBI employees involved in the Hillary Clinton email investigation that showed animus. For example, They called President Trump an effing idiot again, and they called his supporters a slur for the intellectually disabled that I won't repeat in this committee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Does any of that conduct give one confidence in fairness or impartiality in the enforcement of justice?
I think it undercuts confidence, precisely as we said.
Now, you referred to former Congressman Anthony Weiner's seized laptop. It's correct that the FBI discovered the presence of thousands of emails related to the Clinton investigation on September 27th, 2016. How long did Deputy Director McCabe and Director Comey know about the emails that were potentially relevant to the Clinton administration and do absolutely nothing about it?
So Deputy Director McCabe was aware on September 28th, the next day, and was notified on multiple ways and multiple occasions, as well on September 29. There was follow-up about that by Strzok and others. And between September 29 and October 24 or 25, there was no activity by the mid-year team or FBI headquarters. And in fact, it was only reinstigated on October 21 when the New York field office went to the Southern District of New York and said, no one's doing anything about this.
So nearly a month.
Nearly
Thank
a
you,
month.
Mr. Horowitz.
And I'll just to clarify
Please.
also, if I could, it's unclear exactly what and when Director Comey knew, because there is testimony from Deputy Director McCabe, that he briefed him on it somewhere in that late September, early October time period, but he also referred to it as a flyby briefing. And I think in an area like this, you need to be careful, as I'm guessing Director Wray could testify to. When you're managing 37,000 people, it's unclear whether it's fair to hold someone accountable in that position if they only got a flyby briefing. So that's why I'm hesitant to speak on that.
Thank you.
I think you folks can be out of here in 5 minutes. First of all, I'd like to introduce a chronology of events about the Clinton investigation and background documents into the record to supplement the Inspector General's report without objection. So ordered. I have just one short question for Mr. Wray. Mr. McCabe's attorney said that he can't turn over certain emails, the same emails mentioned by Senator Cruz, because he doesn't have them and because of a non-disclosure agreement. We have a copy of that agreement, and it does not contain legally required language to notify the employee of exceptions that protect disclosures to Congress and others. I also wrote you about this on June 5, and I don't have an answer either, and I think you'll probably tell me I get an answer. I was going to ask you when the FBI is going to respond to my oversight request, but I know you'll work on that. I have great confidence you can help us get that information. So, have you informed Mr. McCabe that he is allowed to provide information to Congress? And what steps have you taken to make sure your non-disclosure agreements comply with the law?
So, Senator, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I'm aware of all the specifics of the various back and forth on the non-disclosure agreement involving Deputy Director McCabe. The last I had heard, there was one issue related to this issue, the non-disclosure agreement, that I thought had been resolved. But I also understand there may be some follow-up, and I'm going to need to look into that. I would expect that we would make sure that our agreement
Fox News alert. Let's listen in to White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders at the briefing room.
Forces to secure the border. Congress needs to fix our broken immigration system. To answer some of your questions on this topic, I've invited Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen and the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Kevin McAleenan to the podium. And as always, I'll be back up afterwards to take questions on other news of the day. Thanks.
Well, good afternoon. It is my pleasure to be here because I would love to see if I can help explain some of what's going on and give you some of the facts. I know there have been a lot put out there, but hopefully we can clarify some things today. I just wanted to start by thanking the sheriffs of the United States. I had the privilege of speaking to them this morning at the National Sheriff's Association conference. We are so thankful for their partnership at DHS and all they do to protect our communities, so I thank them. So I want to provide you an update on the illegal immigration crisis on our southern border and the efforts the administration is taking to solve this crisis and to stop the flood of illegal immigrants, drugs, contraband, and crime coming across the border. So let's just start with a few numbers and facts. So in the last 3 months, we have seen illegal immigration on our southern border exceed 50,000 people each month, multiples over each month last year. Since this time last year, there has been a 325% increase in unaccompanied alien children and a 435% increase in family units entering the country illegally. Over the last 10 years, there has been a 1,700% increase in asylum claims, resulting in asylum backlog today in our country of 600,000 cases. Since 2013, the United States has admitted more than 500,000 illegal immigrant minors and family units from Central America, most of whom today are at large in the United States. At the same time, large criminal organizations such as MS-13 have violated our borders and gained a deadly foothold within the United States. This entire crisis, just to be clear, is not new. It's been occurring and expanded over many decades, but currently it is the exclusive product of loopholes in our federal immigration laws that prevent illegal immigrant minors and family members from being detained and removed to their home countries. In other words, these loopholes create a functionally open border. Apprehension without detention and removal is not border security. We have repeatedly called on Congress to close these loopholes. I myself have met with as many members have been willing to meet with me. I've testified 7 times. I will continue to make myself available to ask that they work with us to solve this crisis. Yet the voices most loudly criticizing the enforcement of our current laws are those whose policies created this crisis and whose policies perpetrate it. In particular, we need to reform 3 major loopholes. Let me quickly walk you through them. First, we need to amend the 2008 Trafficking Victims Prevention Reauthorization Act, or TVPR, which is much easier to say. This law encourages families to put children in the hands of smugglers to bring them alone on this dangerous trek northward. And make no mistake, we've talked about this before, this trek is dangerous and deadly. Second, we need to reform our asylum laws to end the systemic abuse of our asylum system and stop fraud. Right now, our asylum system fails to assist asylum seekers who legitimately need it. We are a country of compassion. We are a country of heart. We must fix the system so that those who truly need asylum can, in fact, receive it. Third, we need to amend the Flores Settlement Agreement and recent expansions, which would allow for family detention during the removal process. And we need Congress to fully fund our ability to hold families together through the immigration process. Until these loopholes are closed by Congress, it is not possible as a matter of law to detain and remove whole family units who arrive illegally in the United States. Congress and the courts created this problem, and Congress alone can fix it. Until then, we will enforce every law we have on the books to defend the sovereignty and security of the United States. Those who criticize the enforcement of our laws have offered only one countermeasure: open borders, the quick release of all illegal alien families, and the decision not to enforce our laws. This policy would be disastrous. Its prime beneficiaries would be the smuggling organizations themselves, and the prime victims would be the children who would be plunged into the smuggling machines and gang recruitment on the trip north. There's a lot of misinformation about what DHS is and is not doing as it relates to families at the border, and I want to correct the record. Here are the facts. First, this administration did not create a policy of separating families at the border. We have a statutory responsibility that we take seriously to protect alien children from human smuggling, trafficking, and other criminal actions while enforcing our immigration laws. We have a long existing policy, multiple administrations have followed, that outline when we may take action to protect children. We will separate those who claim to be a parent and child if we cannot determine a familiar or custodial relationship exists. For example, if there's no documentation to confirm the claimed relationship between an adult and a child. We do so if the parent is a national security, public, or safety risk, including when there are criminal charges at issue, and it may not be appropriate to maintain the family in detention together. We also separate a parent and child if the adult is suspected of human trafficking. There have been cases where minors have been used and trafficked by unrelated adults in an effort to avoid detention. And I'd stop here to say in the last 5 months, we have a 314% increase in adults and children arriving at the border fraudulently claiming to be a family unit. This is obviously of concern. And separation can occur when the parent is charged with human smuggling. Under those circumstances, we would detain the parent in an appropriate secure detention facility separate from the child. What has changed is that we no longer exempt entire classes of people who break the law. Everyone is subject to prosecution. When DHS refers a case against a parent or legal guardian for criminal prosecution, the parent or legal guardian will be placed into the U.S. Marshals Service custody for pretrial determination pursuant to an order by a federal judge, and any accompanied child will be transferred to the Department of Health and Human Services and will be reclassified as an unaccompanied alien child. That is in accordance with the TVPRA, a law that was passed by Congress, and a following court order, neither which are actions the Trump administration has taken. And let's be clear, if an American were to commit a crime anywhere in the United States, they would go to jail and they would be separated from their family. This is not a controversial idea. Second, children in DHS and HHS custody are being well taken care of. The Department of Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement provides meals, medical care, and educational services to these children. They are provided temporary shelter, and HHS works hard to find a parent, relative, or foster home to care for these children. Parents can still communicate with their children through phone calls and video conferencing. And a parent who is released from custody can be a sponsor and ask HHS to release the child back into their care. Further, these minors can still apply for asylum and other protections under U.S. immigration law if eligible. We take allegations of mistreatment seriously, and I want to stress this point. We investigate, we hold those accountable when and if it should occur. We have some of the highest detention standards in the country. Claiming these children and their parents are treated inhumanely is not true and completely disrespects the hardworking men and women at the Office of Refugee Resettlement. Third, parents who entered illegally are, by definition, criminals. Illegal entry is a crime as determined by Congress. By entering our country illegally, often in dangerous circumstances, illegal immigrants have put their children at risk. Fourth, CBP and ICE officers are properly trained to care for minors in their custody. DHS and HHS treats all individuals in its custody with dignity and respect and complies with all laws and policy. This reinforces and reiterates the need to consider the best interest of the children and mandates adherence to established protocols to protect at-risk populations, to include standards for the transport and treatment of minors in DHS and HHS custody. Additionally, all U.S. Border Patrol personnel on the southwest border are bilingual, every last one of them. They are directed to clearly explain the relevant process to apprehended individuals and provide detainees with written documentation in both Spanish and English that lays out the process and appropriate phone numbers to contact. And finally, DHS is not separating families legitimately seeking asylum at ports of entry. If an adult enters at a port of entry and claims asylum, they will not face prosecution for illegal entry. They have not committed a crime by coming to the port of entry. As I mentioned, DHS does have a responsibility to protect minors, and in that case as well, we will only separate the family if we cannot determine there is a familiar relationship, if the child may be at risk with the parent or legal guardian, or if the parent or legal guardian is referred for prosecution. We have a duty to protect the American people, and it's one that I take very seriously. Here is the bottom line. DHS is no longer ignoring the law. We are enforcing the laws as they exist on the books. As long as illegal entry remains a criminal offense, DHS will not look the other way. DHS will faithfully execute the laws enacted by Congress as we are sworn to do. As I said earlier today, surely it is the beginning of the unraveling of democracy when the body who makes the laws, instead of changing them, tells the enforcement body not to enforce the law. I asked Congress to ask this week so that we can secure our borders and uphold our humanitarian ideas. These two missions should not be pitted against each other. If we close the loopholes, we can accomplish both. Before I take questions, I just want to ask that in your reporting, please consider the men and women of DHS who are dedicated law enforcement officers and who often put their lives at risk. Let's remember their sacrifice and commitment to this country. And with that, I'll take some questions. Yes.
Secretary Nielsen, if you could, what you talked about there, DHS is no longer ignoring the law. You're calling on Congress to change the law. I mean, that is the big message here. Members of Congress on the Democratic side say that you are using children as a lever to try to get them to take legislative action. What do you say to that?
I say that is a very cowardly response. It's clearly within their power to make the laws and change the laws. They should do so. Yes.
Thank you. Have you seen the photos of children in cages? Have you heard the audio clip of these children wailing that just came out today?
I have not seen something that came out today, but I have been to detention centers. And again, I would reference you to our standards. I would reference you to the care provided, not just by the Department of Homeland Security, but by the Department of Health and Human Services when they get to HHS.
Is that the image of this country that you want out there, children?
The image that I want of this country is an immigration system that secures our borders and upholds our humanitarian ideals. Congress needs to fix it.
How is that
Yes.
Secretary, I'd like to give you a chance to respond to Laura Bush. She had an op-ed. She says this is cruel. She supports an application of the law. Even the current First Lady, Melania Trump, has said we should be a nation of laws. We should do so with heart. Do you have anything you want to tell them? Do you believe they're misunderstanding the situation? Or do you believe there's any component of this policy, which, as you've outlined, other administrations have done, but you're using in a way that is more intense and creates the separation issue?
What my response would be is calling attention to this matter is important. This is a very serious issue that has resulted after years and years of Congress not taking action. So I would thank them both for their comments. I would thank them both for their concerns. I share their concerns, but Congress is the one that needs to fix this.
This policy is not, by your definition, in any way cruel.
It's not a policy. Our policy at DHS is to do what we're sworn to do, which is to enforce the law.
Right, but
Yes.
Just following up on Major's question there, former First Lady Laura Bush compared this to Japanese internment during World War II, one of the darkest days in the nation's history. Do you believe that the effect of this policy, so not the law, but the effect of it on separating children from families in those specific instances is moral, is ethical, is it American?
What I believe is that we should exercise our democratic rights as Americans and fix the problem. It's a problem. Let's fix it. Yes.
How is this not child abuse?
Which, be more specific, please. Enforcing the law?
The images that Cecilia was talking about and the sounds that we've seen from these big box stores, the Walmarts, the other stores, when you see this, how is this not specifically child abuse for these innocent children who are indeed being separated from their parents?
So I want to be clear on a couple other things. The vast majority of children who are in the care of HHS right now, 10,000 of the 12,000, were sent here alone by their parents. That's when they were separated. So somehow we've conflated everything, but there's two separate issues. 10,000 of those currently in custody were sent by their parents with strangers to undertake a completely dangerous and deadly travel alone. We now care for them. We have high standards. We give them meals. We give them education. We give them medical care. There's videos. There's TVs. I visited the detention centers myself. That would be my answer to that question. Yes.
If I could follow up, for the hundreds that are not included in there, you said 10,000, but for the hundreds that we have seen, perhaps up to 2,000, are there any examples of child abuse, do you believe? And how could this not be child abuse for the people who were taken from their parents? Not the ones who were sent here with their parents' blessing with a smuggler, and the people who were taken from their parents.
Unfortunately, I'm not in any position to deal with, hearsay stories. If someone has a specific allegation, as I always do when I testify, I ask that they provide that information to the Department of Homeland Security. We will look into it. Of course, we do not want any situation where a child is not completely adequately taken care of. Yes.
A couple of questions. One, why is the government only releasing images of the boys who are being held? Where are the girls? Where are the young toddlers?
I don't know. I'm not familiar with those particular images, so I'd have to.
Do you know where the girls are? Do you know where the young toddlers are?
We have children in DHS care both, but as you know, most of the children after 72 hours are transferred to HHS. So I don't know what pictures you're referencing, but I'd have to refer you to HHS.
Boys, but we just haven't seen any of the girls, any of the young toddlers, and you're saying that they are being well cared for. So how can you make that claim if you don't know where they are?
It's not that I don't know where they are. I'm saying that the vast majority of children are held by Health and Human Services. We transfer them after 72 hours. I don't know what pictures you're speaking about, but perhaps they're...
They've been released to the public. They've been aired all over national television.
Okay, by DHS or by HHS?
DHS.
Okay, so let's find out from HHS. I don't think there's anything other than they're just the pictures.
By your department, they've been aired all over national television throughout the day, the kids who are being held in the cages. We've only seen the boys.
I will look into that. I'm not aware that there's another picture. Yes.
Let me ask, Secretary, let me just follow up very quickly because you continue to insist that this is something that Congress can change. And yet,
Yes.
This is something that was enacted after the Attorney General announced the zero tolerance policy. This never happened before he announced the zero
That's actually not
tolerance
true.
policy.
So the last
we've never
administration,
seen
the
this under
Obama
previous
administration, the Bush administration, all separated
separated
families
from their
at the,
parents.
they absolutely did.
Well,
They did, their rate was less than ours, but they absolutely did do this. This is not new.
Minors, there's no doubt about that, but this.
They separated
separating
families.
Kids at this rate from their parents is something new and specific to this administration once the Attorney General announced the zero tolerance policy. So why doesn't the president pick up the phone and change the policy? He said he hates it.
I think what the president is trying to do is find a long-term fix. So why don't we have Congress change the laws to change? No, Congress could fix this tomorrow. Yes, I think you were next, right?
Madam Secretary, President Trump has had a lot to say the last few days about immigration, but he's offered no compassion to the families that are being separated at the border. Do you know why that is? And why won't he simply pause your department's enforcement of this administration policy until Congress reaches that long-term fix so that these families can be reunited?
He has been attempting to work with Congress since he's been in office. He's made it very clear that we will enforce the laws of the United States as long as this administration is here. As part of that, he has continually reached out to Congress to fix this. And I think what you've seen him do in the last few days is continue to tell Congress, please work with us. The system is broken. The only people that benefit from the system right now are the smugglers, the traffickers, those who are peddling drugs, and terrorists. So let's fix the system. Yes.
That didn't answer the question, ma'am. Does he feel any compassion for the families that are being separated? He's talked about the parents being possible criminals. He's blamed it on Democrats. He's offered no words of compassion.
I think he has said in tweets that he would like Congress to act to end the underlying laws that require the separation. Yes.
Secretary, just a second. Madam Secretary, it seemed like a couple of days ago, both the president and in your tweets, that the main posture or point was to say that this is not the administration's policy. But it seems like in the last today, that the message is a little bit different, is to say, well, this is our policy, but it's our policy because either we believe it's a deterrent or we don't believe we have the resources to move families entirely. And I'm just wondering, I want to make sure we get the reporting right. Which of those is the most precise way to describe how the administration feels, and given the blowback by a number of Republicans as well as Democrats, are you considering rethinking this based on feedback, or is this the administration's position going forward, period, paragraph?
The laws prohibit us from detaining families while they go through prosecution for illegally entering the border and while they go through prosecutions for immigration proceedings. If we close the loopholes, we can keep the families together, which is what they did in the last administration until a court ruled that we can no longer do that. After 20 days, we have to release both unaccompanied children and accompanied children, which means that we cannot detain families together. The only option is to not enforce the law at all. Yes. Yes.
Okay, so going back to these two questions from Kristen and Margaret, you said that you want Congress to close some loopholes. With that, you also said that you want to make this work. Now, are these kids being used as pawns for a wall? Many people are asking that, and Democrats are saying this is your discretion, and there is no law that says that this White House can separate parents from their children.
The kids are being used by pawns, by the smugglers and the traffickers. Again, let's just pause to think about this statistic. 314% increase in adults showing up with kids that are not a family unit. Those are traffickers, those are smugglers, that is 13, those are criminals, those are abusers.
Wait a minute, let her finish.
So, thank you. All I'm trying to say, the closing that loophole will enable us to detain families together throughout the proceeding as they've done in previous administrations.
Madam Secretary, can you definitively say, are the children being used as pawns against a four-wall? Yes or no? Can you say yes or no to that?
The children are not being used as a pawn. We are trying to protect the children, which is why I'm asking Congress to act. Yes.
Laid out as the legal framework for the decisions that your administration's made. Are what we're seeing, the pictures, the audio, the stories, are they an intended consequence of the administration's decision-making or an unintended consequence?
I think that they reflect the focus of those who post such pictures and narratives. The narratives we don't see are the narratives of the crime, of the opioids, of the smugglers, of people who are killed by gang members, of American children who are recruited, and then when they lose the drugs, they're tased and beaten. We don't have a balanced view of what's happening, but what's happening at the border is being overrun by those who have no right to cross it. As I said before, if you're seeking asylum, go to a port of entry. You do not need to break the law of the United States to seek asylum.
People are being turned away from ports of entry, Madam Secretary.
That actually is incorrect. We have limited resources. We have multiple missions at CBP. And what we do is, based on the very high standards we have, if we do not have enough bed space, if we do not have enough medical personnel on staff, if we do not have enough caretakers on staff, then we will tell people that come to the border they need to come back. We are not turning them away. We are saying we want to take care of you in the right way. Right now, we do not have the resources at this particular moment in time. Come back.
Thank you very much. Are you intending for this to play out as it is playing out? Are you intending for parents to be separated from their children? Are you intending to send a message?
I find that offensive. No, because why would I ever create a policy that purposely does that?
Perhaps it's a deterrent.
No, it's the way that it works.
It was a deterrent.
That's not the question that you asked me. But the answer is, it's a law passed by the United States Congress. Rather than fixing the law, Congress is asking those of us who enforce the law to turn our backs on the law and not enforce the law. It's not an answer. The answer is to fix the laws.
Will the administration refrain from its current policy if Congress were to pass something that's close to what you want? Or will it continue to require the separation of parents from their children until the president gets exactly what he wants?
If Congress closes the loopholes, many of which are closed in the two bills that we hope are taken up this week by the House, then they close the loopholes. and the families will stay together throughout the proceedings. Thank you.
Do you think policy is a deterrent? Madam Secretary, do you believe the policy is a deterrent? Why?
Thank you, Secretary Nielsen. I'll jump right in and go to other questions, news of the day. Steve.
The President said he would talk to the North Korean leader Kim yesterday. Do you know if that happened?
I know the president has spoken with a number of administration officials that are working on the details following the North Korean summit, and we'll keep you posted on those details, but I'm not aware of a specific call between the two leaders at this time.
There's a report that the United States and South Korea have agreed to suspend joint military drills in August. Is that real?
I'm sorry, the last part of the question?
That they've agreed to suspend joint military drills in August. Are you aware of this?
Those conversations are ongoing at this point. As long as the North Koreans continue to act in good faith, as we saw in Singapore, then we expect those things to be on pause at this point. Bill?
Yes, Sarah, has the president discussed the family separation policy with the First Lady in light of her statement yesterday? And does he have any plans to come out and address the American people, maybe take some questions about how his administration's enforcing?
The president did take a number of questions, as I'm sure you're all aware, on Friday, in which what he actually said very closely mirrored what the First Lady said. He said he hates seeing this. He's called on Congress, not just Friday, but for months, he's called on Democrats in Congress to work with him. Let's fix this problem. The president isn't trying to kick the can down the road. He's actually trying to work with Congress to get real solutions and to fix the problem, and that's what we're doing. Jeff, and I'll take your question since you and your network falsely accused me of not wanting to be here, so I'll be glad to pass that question on to you now.
Why did you decide to have Secretary Nielsen answer questions instead of you?
I'm here answering questions as well, but I thought it was important for the secretary and one of the primary experts on this process and the things that are going on to come out here and have the chance to speak to you and for you guys to be able to ask questions directly of her and the leaders in this administration. But I'm standing here in front of you. John?
I have a real question. Would the president sign a bill that did not
I wondered if you were going to throw it away.
Would the president sign a bill that did not include border funding if it did indeed close this loophole that Secretary Nielsen talked about? Would he sign that specific bill, or does he require an entire bill with that $25 billion in border?
Look, we've laid out what we would like to see on a number of different occasions. There are currently 2 bills that are in process in the House. The president supports both of those pieces of legislation that we have voiced support for the details in those. The president doesn't just want to see a Band-Aid put on this. He wants us to actually fix our immigration system. He's tired of administrations claiming that they want to help the system and then just kicking the can down the road. He wants to actually fix the problems. He wants to secure our border. This isn't just something we can tinker with. We have to actually fix the entire system, and he's committed to doing that.
He would require
again, we've laid out what we want to see in legislation. The president wants to fix the system, and we're committed to doing that, and we hope Congress will actually do their parts. Democrats have got to stop playing political games and actually come to the table and get real about solving the problem. John?
Thanks. On the IG report and the hearings in Congress with Mr. Horowitz and Director Wray, the president tweeted several times today and yesterday that the Mueller investigation continues to be, quote, a witch hunt. He said on Friday that after reviewing the IG report, it shows that there's no evidence of collusion. His own FBI director today said that Mueller is not on a witch hunt and that the report doesn't speak to the special counsel investigation. How is there that disconnect there between what the president believes another branch of his administration is doing?
The president's been clear. He was obviously very involved in his campaign, and he's laid out a number of times that there was no collusion, and he strongly feels this is a witch hunt. The president's also said that the IG report clearly calls into question the credibility of James Comey and many other senior FBI investigators who have been involved in the Russia investigation, and that report validates the claims that he's made repeatedly. Dave?
Thanks, Sarah. The governor of Massachusetts, who's a Republican today, reversed course and ordered the National Guard not to send assets or personnel to the southwest border because he said the actions of the federal government are resulting in the inhumane treatment of children. Would you comment on that, and have you seen any other impact on border operations from this whole situation?
I haven't seen his comments specifically, but I would tell him that he should call every member of Congress, particularly those in his own state, and ask them to fix the laws. There's only one body here that gets to create legislation, and it's Congress. Our job is to enforce it, and we would like to see Congress fix it. That's why the president has repeatedly called on them to work with him to do just that. Deborah?
What was the president's reaction to Laura Bush's piece in the Washington Post?
I'm sorry, what was the last part of your question?
What was the president's reaction to Laura Bush's piece in the Washington Post?
I didn't speak directly with him about that, but I'm happy to address the concerns and echo what Secretary Nielsen said. Look, we share the concern. The president himself said that he doesn't like this process, but once again, it's Congress's job to change the law. We're calling on them to do exactly that. And frankly, this law was actually signed into effect in 2008 under her husband's leadership, not under this administration. We're not the ones responsible for creating this problem. We've inherited it, but we're actually the first administration stepping up and trying to fix it. John?
Thank you, Sarah. I have here in my hands figures from the German Ministry of the Interior under Minister Seehofer, which says that crime has gone down 5.1% in Germany. In fact, it's the lowest rate in a quarter century in Germany. Violent crime down 2.4%, burglary down 23%, and theft down 11.8%. Where did the president get the statement that crime was way up in Germany under the Merkel plan for admitting refugees?
I'm not aware of the report that you're referencing, but I'll be happy to check into it and circle back.
It's from the German Ministry of the Interior.
I heard that part, but I haven't seen it, but I'll be happy to check into it and circle back. John?
Thanks a lot, Sarah. I read the First Lady's statement that was put out, and she seems very troubled by this zero tolerance policy. Is there any sort of daylight between the president and the First Lady on this issue?
I think we've made it abundantly clear that the daylight exists between Democrats and Congress and their ability to change this law. The president himself said that he doesn't, he hates these images, he hates this process, and that's why he's asked for it to be fixed. I feel like we keep ignoring the fact that the president isn't the one that creates the law, but it's Congress's job to create the law, and the president's already laid out and gladly stated a number of times publicly that he would sign legislation that fixes these loopholes and fixes our immigration system. I think that people should be begging and banging down the doors of Congress and asking them to join with the president instead of fighting him, instead of constantly criticizing. Why aren't they offering solutions? You have people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer who come out and complain and attack. It's because they have no message, they have no solutions. We've laid out a solution, and we'd like to see them work with us to put it in place. Steve?
Also critical of this particular policy, besides the people that you mentioned on the Democratic side, are a number of Republicans and also some very prominent members of some of the president's base, evangelical Christians. Do you know if the president has heard from those members of his base, evangelicals in particular, had discussions with the president about this particular policy, and can you sort of fill us in on discussions the president may have had in that regard?
I think any evangelical or in any church for that matter, that feels strongly they should open up their doors and help facilitate some of these individuals. I think that's their calling, that's the mission of the church, and they should certainly fulfill that. If they want to fix the immigration system, then they should call their members of Congress and ask them to join with us to do that. Steve?
Thank you.
Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
There's some confusion about this Space Force that the president announced today. Did he actually sign anything? Does he believe that this can be done without the approval of Congress? The Air Force appears opposed to it. Where is the support for this coming from besides the president?
The president's asked the Department of Defense to start the process. We're in the beginning stages of it, and we're going to work with the Department of Defense and the other relevant parties to put it into place. Francesca.
Sarah, if the administration is, as it says, not using the children as pawns in this situation, then why not just have Congress pass legislation that narrowly deals with this family separation issue and sign it, and then deal with the other aspects of the immigration system that the president once overhauled with at a different time?
Once again, we want to fix the entire system. We don't want to just tinker with it. The president is tired of watching people kick it down the road and not take responsibility and not fix the problems that we have.
Ideally, Sarah, that he would like to see all these other things change about the immigration system, but we're dealing with this particular situation right now. We're
dealing with a number of situations. That's not the only one. We have people flooding over the borders. Look, the president wants people to come to this country, but we want them to come legally and through the right process. And that's what we're asking. We want to secure the border. There have been a number of individuals that are permanently separated from their families due to the illegal aliens that have come across this border and murdered and killed American citizens. Where is the outrage over that separation? We want to fix the whole thing. We don't want to just tinker with one part of it. This is a broken system, and we've got to quit ignoring it. Just ignoring the rule doesn't fix it, and that's what this administration is actually trying to do. I'm going to take one last question. Sager.
Thank you, Sarah. So the Secretary Pompeo came out today, and he said that in exchange for denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula, that the United States had committed to updating the armistice agreement that's currently in place. Can you confirm that the president did make this commitment to Kim Jong-un, and what exactly does updating the armistice mean? Does it put the future of U.S. forces on the Korean Peninsula in question, and just any more information you could update us on in that regard?
We're finalizing the details of what the process will look like. Certainly would confirm Secretary Pompeo's comments and would refer you to the State Department and the Department of Defense, who will be putting those details out and together. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.
Okay, that was White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, who had some help from Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen fielding questions, very intense, about the policies of separating families at the southern border. And Greg, I think the main point from both of them was that the people in Congress complaining so much about the effects of the policies were the ones that created the policies that created the chaos on the southern border in the first place.
You know, I think what's frustrating, if you look at that press conference, if you look on Twitter over the weekend, there's a lot of opinion. There is so much opinion, no solution. An opinion is not a solution. I don't think you can find a single person who does not like this, right? No one like you have Laura Bush writing something, you have the First Lady writing something, everybody says it's bad, but then you try to read or go down and you can't find the solution. I have solutions. You have a bus that's right there. You have a bus right there. You don't want to separate the family, they get in the bus. And then you wait for the next family, get in the bus, and then you drive them back. Ironically, it's never in Mexico. It's Honduras or it's El Salvador. They never stop in Mexico. If you are definitely in danger, wouldn't you stop at the first place you could stop at? Not just go, hey, you know what? We're going to go all the way through. No, just stop. If I'm in danger, if I need to leave the United States, I go to Canada. I don't go to New Zealand. Okay? The other thing, too, is I think
cracking down. You can't get it.
I do think Donald Trump has an opportunity for the solution. He should try to figure out the immediate solution, which I think is the bus, have a pathway to citizenship, the wall, and the big door. But he's got to get in the Oval Office, and he's got to talk to the people, because the only reason why we're having this problem is it's the result of a bigger problem. A bigger